afternoon, and thank you for joining us in this wonderful room to welcome even more people. I'm very happy for you to attend this round table. You'll see there are quite some experts in the providers risk. François Samar, I'm in charge of CYBERVADIS. Well, is there anyone who has been reading the latest report, Horizon? You can hear me like this. It's better, isn't it? And this latest Horizon report was published about a fortnight ago, referring to 24,000 bridges, and 62% were coming from a third party, which is enormous, enormous, another one. And the impact on SolarWinds is modifying the statistics. There is, of sure, a strong trend regarding responsibility. What are we talking about that? And to listen to the experts in that field. And first of all, I'd like to ask Jérôme to introduce this subject, and it's most convenient to introduce all the speakers. François, Jérôme Billois, I'm one of the associates of Waystone and in charge of cybersecurity. I will talk about a vision in the big corporate world, and we, as a provider, we are quite often assessed by the customers and also the way we experience this on a day-by-day basis. First of all, to share the figures of the reality on the field, defense-wise, as François was talking about attack. Our benchmark is 65 big companies. We measure the maturity on a referential list. And as such, we've got some details about risk management of third parties. 3 figures. There is an inventory of providers which reaches 51% of the companies in benchmark, a little bit more than half, as the purchasing is keeping that supplies inventory process. There is a security policy of the providers, i.e. rules to request from these providers. 45% of the companies, corporate world, implemented this, and the audit of providers, we reach only 31%, and there's one major break to this, which is the issue to audit all these providers regarding the volume of providers. This is the state of the art of the market, and I think we'll talk about the way and how we get there together. Estelle Joly, and I'm working for CYBERVADIS, and let's have a figure that Jérôme has just been talking about. 65%, it's the percentage of data breaches related to a breach on the supply chain. My name is Jean-Yves Pechot, manager of cybersecurity Sanofi. Laurent Amsel, our SSI of Carrefour Group. My name is Natina Natalia, and I'm the Chief Security Officer for Akema. And I'm sorry for my French, as I'm a French citizen, but I'll do my utmost to be able to talk to you today here. Well, thank you for that, and we will start with that approach. What is our approach? First of all, Jérôme said, a big number of providers, how to assess these, how to choose them, how to determine some priorities. Jean-Yves, could you inform us about that? Well, a few words, and I will try to ensure to be very practical. It's either about action ideas or a new horizon in terms of spots. Well, the providers, it is managed by the purchasing officer. If it's not that easy to find, ask your purchasing manager. He's in charge of providers and he's in charge of all providers, even if this purchasing position is not centralized. Beware partners. Partners are corporate worlds working with yours, which is not getting through that channel as there is no purchasing contract. There is no order. There are just partners, entities without contracts, without order, as there might be an exchange of services, or because it's free, just for free. It might be an administration or whatsoever. Don't forget that, because it's also there's also a risk potential. Providers risk, it's much too much. We probably have about 10,000 partners and we don't know them, and we're not going to assess all of them, only those with a cyber risk potential. For Sanofi, our company. Well, first echo I got from Sanofi in assessing the IT providers, it's up to them. No, they are not, because there are only 2,000 digital providers out of the 50,000 providers. If there were only them, there are not much. Many providers for your company provide a kind of vital service to your company. To deliver that service, need their IT, which is paramount. A simple example, just to understand what's a vital provider, which is not IT. When you are about to spread medics or drugs to the pharmacy or to a hospital, you need to be able to trace between the inventory stock and when it gets into the pharmacy. If there's any issue, you must be a position to block the sales and to recall, which is the case elsewhere. A transport company getting up and back to the pharmacy, is that a vital function? And purchasing said no. They've got lorries. If they've got an issue with a lorry, they take another one. Issue to deliver is that you need to be able to trace. And that's IT, and that's exclusively devoted with the company you signed with. As a competitor has got also IT, but has no database to trace. So that company, which was so-called vital, has been, of course, a victim of ransomware, and we didn't get these drugs for 3 weeks. All lorries were on the parking lot, but we couldn't use them. This is what you need to get them to understand. It's not our IT, it's their IT. That entity, which is, of course, growing grass or mowing grass, it won't be able to be paid, or we don't get pay attention. It's not a subject, but the one delivering is critical. So do think about that example, because it's really meaningful about who you need to assess. Thank you, Jean-Yves. I'd like to fulfill this example, the way to catch the providers. And there is an error, which is to assess the providers within the cybersecurity team. There's some project will happen without the cybersecurity team to be involved in that process. Right approach is indeed a purchasing management. That's where assessment needs to be made. Hence, you get the review of the questionnaires. The buyers are not always necessarily the most relevant and the most convenient to assess the compliance in such a questionnaire. So it's a joint effort to train purchasing team, and we'll talk later on that roundtable about a means to assess whether it be questionnaire, a plan, or an approach. But there is a training issue on the clauses which you cannot negotiate, and other clauses you can allow some non-compliance. Depends on the subject, the draft project, and so forth. It might depend on the software provider. Secondly, you're talking about assessment, hence the choice of your provider. That assessment, is it just about to make that choice or to have a choice of a provider. No, according to me, within Carrefour, it's to look for a involvement and a promise of that provider, not about who at the security level is expected or not expected. It's about the partnership with the provider, as eventually we'd like to ensure him to follow up, to monitor, and to propose the right batches in the software, and also to ensure security. And as such, there's assessment and somehow engagement, which is so important in that perimeter. I'd like to talk about when you engage with your provider. Well, to us, it's an application, it's a new provider with you. At first, about to look at the offer, is it just someone from the procurement who is suggesting to introduce such a provider? So we proceed to a survey with 12 questions. It's 12 minutes of their time. They got the answer this question, if anything is to be done for the company. That's the pieces of information. And if there is a type 2 SOC that is replacing the CYBERVADIS process, it's 400 so many periods produced by INCYBER with an external auditor. ISO 001 with 114 standards. That is what we did in February 22. CYBERVADIS has already looked into 60% of the review of CYBERVADIS on ISO 001. And to us, the type 2 is the right process. That kind of survey, which proceeded to assessment of procurement, well, the providers had to get ahead in that evaluation path. The service providers getting into your company must be understanding the systematic relationship with your data. That's first of all. If they don't understand, they cannot be your partner. As Jean-Yves just said a while ago, it's not just about a partner that you assess. There are many things to be done that he has to check. It is also about a partner too. Each partner, like we have got one relationship with our providers, but they might have other partners within and have relations with others who have got also an open door to us. Just to proceed to the CYBERVADIS questionnaire and to understand the whole relation chain. That is so important. We will just understand, know your customer and how. What is he going to do with your pieces of data? Is going to store it or whatsoever? To us, we start the prospect of CYBERVADIS, and we have already done that RFP, the request for proposal, in the appeal to offers. So we progress in the CYBERVADIS. And then after this test, we get to another team of infrastructure architecture to look at the additional questions. We explore CYBERVADIS, the dashboard, for the scoring, isn't it? But below that, here's a less higher note, and that might be related to the questions about the relation with us. That's our process to engage with a provider, a new provider with us. Well, in order to take that example, quite often there are thousands of providers, you don't know how to approach. It's clear you need to check the segment in families of the providers with different treatment. What criteria? And when you start with purchasing, the point number one is the amount of the contracts. And that is, of course, an issue because there might be enormous contract with a low cyber security potential. So we will add additional criteria. The ultra classic one, the DIC, all of you know, it is the availability, integrity, and confidentiality. We look at what is at stake about the availability of the services of the provider. And as Jean-Yves said, not only from the point of view of the digital services provided, but whatsoever the service, digital or not. And integrity-wise, we will look into the way they will be able to have an impact on the data and alter the data quality, but also the way they might alter the information system. More and more attacks start from the third party and go up the chain to the customer. And indeed, into that eye, you got the two dimensions. Confidentiality, it's really clear to the purchasing team with GDPR, of course, privacy, and sensitive pieces of information for that company. Hence, we check very closely from that point of view, but it is also an issue of 15 and 100,000 providers. It's enormous somehow. So you need to enable to get into a top 10, 10, 50, 10, 20, 50 by exchanging with these professions, but also getting there with intuition into the security world. You know your corporate world. You know where you are the weakest link. At least you can attack and not to have that tunneling effect whereby you try to play to show the display of 50,000 units. Well, with CYBERVADIS, we focus on 4 criteria, which is compliant to what Jérôme just said. First, confidential data to provide it to this provider, sensitive data to that party. Third, IT connection with this party, third party. And fourthly, is it critical for you, whatever the activity? These criteria are implemented in order to use them easily by any person, all users in the company, because eventually any person of the company that can engage with a third party must check those 4 questions. If one is positive, he has to get through into the audit assessment process. Secondly, amongst our customers, those amongst which programs is implemented works and functions because they've got a dialogue with purchasing power. And then you get the others. And the first issue on our program, it's the capacity to identify the providers and to get the data and to involve purchasing team. There are some new professions. At Sanofi, we've got a transversal cross-link tracer and some with consultants in order to deploy these initiatives within their group. Well, thank you. We will tackle the second point related to the methodology. What methodology we might use, and I'm wondering whether I use the plural or not. What's your approach? Do you have got several methodologies or one single for the whole? Several methodologies. First, according to the solutions, as I just said, we don't assess a SaaS provider as a software provider, as compared to an intellectual services provider with different issues. The second reason we assess different ways, it is because there are several subsidiaries which are really working in silos methodology-wise. But there are many common points. I was talking about security plan. That's the name we give to that security questionnaire, which is engaging. It is, of course, a kind of bylaw of the contract. There are several models. It is centralized within the purchasing team. I've already tackled that question and the difficulties it might cause, i.e., how do we check this? How do we check the truth of that provider, whether it's verified? There are some questions requesting quite a lot from them. How do we check? How do we judge? How do we assess whether it is not compliant? Some subsidiaries using also cyber hacking process, BitSites, as a compliment because we know that solutions are valued but are very partial. And it might not be a compliment, isn't it? And if I'm here, it's because we just started first quarter this year a contract with CYBERVADIS on the French perimeter, and it has quite a success. Quite questionnaires have been sent, and the feedback is positive, which solves quite some issues like checking the proof which are produced by the company, and that is referring to quite some cybersecurity issues. That's enough for Carrefour, a mix, I'd say, of a traditional approach with its weaknesses, the questionnaire which is qualified as you want. We are modernizing this with CYBERVADIS. Well, to you, it is the case. And a question I'm wondering, what criteria in order to get that assessment system which is reliable within a landscape of diverse systems? Yes, I do share what has been said. No reason for us to be different here. I'd say, to answer your question, the magical thing, it is not to assess the provider because it has been done by others, and the result, the output is available. Because if we are 50, there are certainly tenth of providers that we share. Why would we do all our audits separately, while when you do that for me, it's okay with me? Whatsoever the method, yes, there is a method which is founded upon the standards, cyber standards, and if we limit ourselves to this, it's quite okay in a major number of cases. What job did you do, and to exchange with what we do? The second part we are just starting to gather upon. There are some providers with a very technical mission, getting beyond the simple provider, which are co-participants of the production process, i.e. a production line within chemicals or anything else, the big machines and the machines producing the drugs. This one, well, the single approach, the cyber methodology will not be sufficient. We need to address the way they build their tools and their product. As such, you will get aware that all those big companies are very good in cyber to protect their own company, but when it's about to protect the tools they introduced with us, then it's really terrible. They open their doors and they're not demanding at all. Our companies are open to partners, and we are co-building with partners. When you get technology inside your own company, whether it be IT, industrial, or whatsoever, do be careful with the maturity of their provider, specifically the way they develop their technological unit. There's an enormous discrepancy between what he does for his company and what he does for you with your products. Thank you, Jérôme. Just to listen to your point of view, it's my remark about Jean-Yves. Very important, paramount regarding providers and partners. There is a change now. With some partners, they are certifying their employees before being able to do anything with the client, within the client's company. With this change, we will scale it up, Now, I've got the headset of the RSSI headstone. It's the poor Timoleon who is assessed cybersecurity-wise several times a week, as there are more than 500 customers. Our customers have got their own subsidiaries in different fields, so they take this questionnaire and they add a few. It's not sufficient to compare and to send the results, the output of 3 weeks before. So we've got a full-time in our team to manage the interaction with the customer, only to fulfill Excel files. So his added value, security-wise, is zero. It's even lower because we lose resources with a scarcity of resources. And that's what we have got, all staffing issues also in the internal teams, isn't it? This platform of assessment is very positive. You look at a way to mobilize our teams, but also to make progress and to see what stage has been reached on a regular basis, and to have got a leverage effect the way we can measure our security level and our interaction with the customers. Thank you, Estelle. Very good experience with CYBERVADIS about the work provided by these providers. A study has been done about the workload and the cost for them. Yes, we got feedback from the providers saying that cybersecurity work, it's about €1,000 for each questionnaire they have to fulfill. And quite often they get no feedback. So no added value for them at all. Our questionnaires, it is the same kind of question, but in a different order, losing their time and their money for those providers, service providers. Methodology-wise, CYBERVADIS approach, we wanted this to be based on the review of the proof. Our analysts validated ever since the start 55% of the security control made by these and declared by the companies before and after assessment. We don't know at all if we keep the same score whether we go from 800 to 800, and there is no correlation between their profiles and the level of provided proofs. Hence, it is that important to have a review of proofs, which can be done only by exchanging the output. Otherwise, it's not possible on major volumes. And a question, what do they think about these providers? How do they react to this approach?
Oui, pour nous, en fait.
At CAMA, we divide CYBERVADIS responsibilities into two. We bought a token to help with this problem. If we need to pay, we'll pay for this. But they're not always okay to pay for this. And then there are other things are already done with other companies. And we cannot look at the details. So this creates conflicts with our provider who wants to be our partner, but we cannot move forward with the process. But it's really rare for us to accept someone in the CYBERVADIS process. In the past, we had surveys with 64 questions. It's really time-consuming and superficial. We have algorithms, we have questions. But and when we renew our provider, we might ask them for an assessment, we might not, but we make sure we have these clauses. There's expenses, the responsibilities. And another assessment. Or maybe if there's another challenge during that time, 3-5 years. But we ask our provider to carry out another assessment if needed. But in general, the process is an assessment. It can be used for other things. And it's key to measure the maturity of the provider. So I think after this, it works well. I'd like to respond or to react on paying the providers, because there might be many providers in the room. So it might not be clear for everyone. CYBERVADIS business model is we hire providers who take a subscription. It's 500 to 1,500 euros per year to be assessed, to receive the result, their benchmark, and their remediation plan, which is used for all those who do not have a cybersecurity team internally. So when we're talking about the price of 1,000 euros per survey questionnaire, it's 1,000 euros, and then you are able to share the results with your clients. So if another client wants to assess them, they will not have to pay again. That's the whole point of our work. Yes, it was important to specify this. Laurent, have you got anything to add? I said we were quite young on this solution. Well, the feedback is quite positive. We've had the first feedback, and we haven't found the suppliers, the providers who do not want to answer CYBERVADIS. In the first year, Carrefour is paying for all the assessments, which helps. To conclude on a more positive note, we've been working with you for 5 years, I think, maybe more. It was difficult at the beginning because we might have been pioneers on assessing the providers. They did not understand. And I'll share something with you that shows the change in the outlook of the provider. 30% of the providers get a spontaneous subscription after a first request from Sanofi. And 80% have better results at the second assessment. So for the provider, it's a communication tool, but also an ownership tool for their cybersecurity. The provider can be very small. They will never have a CISO. They will never have a cyber team. They might be an IT team of 15 people. But knowing where they are, even with a fuzzy landscape, because it's not very specific, it doesn't tell you whether your firewall rules are good. Knowing where you are is opening your eyes already. And when you drive with your eyes open, it works better than when otherwise. So this is what it brings, and I think it's positive. I think we should tell our French SMEs, go ahead. It will cost you far less than an audit. Wavestone will not be able to carry it out because there are hundreds of thousands to do. But start with this. It's 1,000 euros. Look at where if you can answer the questionnaire or not. And this is the first thing. If the answer is not right, you will know why, how, and as Estelle said, we will give you resources to work on it for 1,000 euros. It's quite efficient. Thank you very much. This is perfect because it's a good segue into the next point. We've been able to assess the role of a company such as CYBERVADIS or the role of a client. It's not to buy ratings. It's to improve the IT system in the company. Of course, our role is to make things safer, not just to rate them. So how do we assess the impact of the cybersecurity policy and this assessment policy? At Sanofi, we are moving into the second stage of maturity. Our 1,500 suppliers are being assessed, but there are many who are not being assessed. Internally at Sanofi, I cannot create value with this assessment because the sales direction does not send this information to the IT departments or others. If you are looking for a provider, you look at the provider base in your company, or sales tell you, or purchasing tells you, this is what you should look for. And in this database, I would like to show a red, orange, or a green flag for cybersecurity. I'm not saying that they will never be hacked. I'm saying that I have a partner a provider who's being serious on the topic, who's working on this. Just like for privacy or for other mentions, there are very few management or sales directions that can send you this information today. They can tell you, well, it's too costly, we will negotiate, and it's too costly, it will be less costly. This is what they do well, but we ask them to be strategists in partnership, in the relationship with our partners, to give us the best partners. They're not necessarily the least expensive. They're not those that they chose, they're those that will create the most value. There are those, plus those who will give us a sustainable partnership and service. And if they are not well in terms of cyber, it will not work. So we are stuck in a process, and we are stuck in a process, and we cannot stop it. Same for medication. So this is what we ask purchasing. Change who you are. Start being provider managers and have a strategic vision on partnerships and give us visibility on the different maturity stages of the partners. And we are not there yet. My answer to this question about the future. It's important not to be static on assessing the supplier. The point is not to choose the supplier and then to forget about cybersecurity. Why am I saying this? Well, you can look at the supplier who has a good rating when signing the contract. Nothing tells us that they will maintain this over time and that they will follow up with the changes in the threat. If we have a mediocre provider but we want to work with them, we truly want to work with them, we must forge a partnership between the client and the provider so that together they can work on cybersecurity, work on their level. And I think this happens with the new assessments, but also by cooperating, by knowing your major providers, by meeting with them, and changing KPIs. And my message to the CISOs is to breathe life into the relationship between providers and client. Do not stop when the contract is signed and the work has started. With our provider, we used the CYBERVADIS score board. If the partner has less than 550, they cannot be a partner. Then they're not mature in cybersecurity, or then do not take it seriously. Between 550 and 800, there are many actions to give recommendations. And then we have a form that we send, the risk acceptance form. And I sign it, the CISO signs it with the person responsible for the project. So it's an agreement, and I have a red flag. I say, okay, I accept this partner, but they do not have the caliber we want. We are going to act in our reporting, in our KPIs. We'll show this. If we see that the partner is not doing anything, we'll flag this, so that when the business project manager cannot tell me, I didn't know. No, I've included this conversation. I've noted that the partner is weak on cyber. We are not auditors. We are security managers. If the provider tells you, let's do this and that, well, it's not my job. My job is to protect the information, the data, the systems. If providers have more than 800, that's a good rating to work with us. So you can assess your own company on CyberVadis. You cannot ask your partner to be stronger than you. So when we got the score, we had fewer than 800, not very far. So we want them to have the same rating as us. Thank you. Let me add 2 points. It might be forward-looking. These might not be the steps that we've just mentioned. In the short term, it's stopping the partnership. The issue is to make sure that the data have been removed, that the service stops, that everything has been decommissioned, and this is still a shady area in the parameters I've looked at. In platforms, we could imagine a request for commitment from the provider showing that the service has stopped properly with a declaration in the platform. This would be more formal, and it's not done very often. Another idea, and I'm opening up to a more forward-looking future, is providers in software. When you have a platform with a lot of data, it can be simple for a provider to indicate who are their providers and to maintain this database. It can be difficult because for some contracts you have some partners and for others not. But it could give a quick vision of the whole supply chain's sensitivity. Level 1, 2, 3, 4. Do we make sure we ensure the safety of shoes for people coming to work? Maybe not, but where should we stop? But it's important to look at the supply chain, especially in software. If you're already mature on these topics, I suggest you look at the topic that is called SBOM, Software Bill of Materials. These are works mostly in the US to make sure that when you have a digital asset, you receive a bill of materials, just like in the physical world. So a list of all the components, knowing where they come from, where they go, etc. This should remain as an emerging topic in the future. Thank you very much. This is perfect. I have nothing else to do. I was moving to the last slide in the conclusion. I suggest the 4 speakers conclude the intervention. If we have 5 more minutes, we'll take a few questions. Let's first hear from everyone. Questions? Any question? Many questions. The first one is about the CYBERVADIS tool. When you carry out the assessment, I would like to know whether it's a declarative assessment, the provider follows the questionnaire and only says, yes, I'm fully compliant on all the questions, or is there a check? Do you check what's said in the questionnaire that proves yes, it is actually being done with the provider? Second question, what's the lifetime of these answers compared to the tool? Do we certify that these answers are valid for some period, just like a sort of certification, where you are able to know how often this questionnaire should be redone? And last question, who guarantees the security of these providers in the case of a cyber attack? Thank you. On the first question on proofs assessment, when you are being assessed on the platform CyberVadis, you receive an online cybersecurity questionnaire, which is adapted to your company. You will not receive the same questionnaire if you're a large company or a startup. You receive 10 questions on pre-qualification on your IT practices that will open up other types of questions or not. So you have a list of all the security controls you should have placed given your profile. When you check a control as put in place, you need to provide the proofs of this in terms of governance and implementation. And all the elements you provide are reviewed by the analysts, and the security controls are being assessed based on these elements. I hope this answers your questions. Now, on the second topic, what we do is we give out an assessment at a given date. It is written in the platform. Then the company being assessed subscribes to CYBERVADIS and receives one assessment per year. It can be assessed once a year. It's part of the subscription plan, and this is what we recommend. A client can see the date of the last assessment and the history. If you share your assessment with many clients to pool the resources, then you should use this reassessment every year. Now, third question was about Estelle. I would like to add something quickly. It's always in a rush. For procurement, you need a cybersecurity assessment before you sign the contract. But it's not CYBERVADIS which is the real backup. It's always someone will sign tomorrow. The procurement has already started. So in general, CYBERVADIS assesses really quickly. And now it's about the time that the provider takes to fill in the questionnaire. If it's done quickly, this is what happens. Now on monitoring, you should know that the improvement plan can be seen by a client, including if you have progress during the year. So if you start working on an action, you can show it on the platform. And you can say, I've put this in place, and if you want to provide additional documents, we'll be able to see what's the impact, the estimated impact of your improvements, the improvements you've already implemented. Now, on guarantee, in the case of a cyber attack, we do not guarantee that the well-rated providers will not be attacked, because anyone can be attacked, as you know, whatever the level of maturity. So we do not have guarantees in the case of a cyber attack.
Oui.
Bonjour, j'avais une question par...
One question about the audit. Can you speak louder, please? Do you plan to have on-site audits? Or do the CYBERVADIS clients do audits on-site?
Alors, nous, on ne fait pas d'audit sur site, on est uniquement...
We do not have on-site audits, we're only remote. Our clients will decide for strategic ITs. They will have audits on-site, and technical audits, and they have to do this. It's absolutely normal, but we will not do this. We do ISMS assessments, and we give the results of these assessments and recommendations for providers, for most providers. But for strategic providers, well, it's a multi-level strategy. For the most essential providers, the SSI team will have an audit plan, including internal audits, and its control plans, monitoring plans. And this is where we manage it. But if we are in category 2 with thousands of suppliers who are important, that's where the platforms play a part. And then we have all of the other providers where we only have contractual clauses that we do not necessarily check or audit. It's rather legal safety net. It's worth what it is worth. But yes, platforms help us with this high volume, high risk group. At CYBERVADIS, the IT suppliers represent 1/3 of the companies we assessed, but 2/3 are not IT providers. They can be lawyers, consultants, HR solutions. You can have lots of them. People being given sensitive data, strategic data, marketing agencies, etc. Logistics companies. So we have a lot of assessed companies who are not strategic IT providers. Another question?
Bonjour, donc j'ai peut-être en fait plus peut-être envers Sanofi et
A question for Sanofi in terms of feedback. In what part of your company process do you launch this maturity? Do you decide to secure the supply chain and to launch waves of supplier assessment, or do you assess them in call for tenders, in RFPs? There can be many solutions. Another comment for the gentleman on the left. On the mapping of tier 2, 3. Let's not forget with GDPR, we are forced to list all the subcontractors. This is the first aspect that should be taken into account. It's also a regulatory aspect and mandatory aspect. Your question is very relevant. Wanting to assess your providers means you need to know them and intervene before signing the contract rather than after. That is for sure. It's not easy. It's not simple. At Sanofi, we have IT projects that are being checked with cybersecurity, of course. Otherwise, it always ends up badly for the internal employees because it's unacceptable. We are working in pharma, so we are being assessed a lot. So we assess the suppliers. But that's a very small number of suppliers. We don't have many IT suppliers, but we can also cover non-IT suppliers because we are in industrial projects. Then we have the legal service with whom we have a very tight partnership. We produced a cyber annex to the contract, and as soon as we have a question, it comes back to us and we work with the lawyers. This is another source of information. What we cannot do today, and to be very honest, is to have the purchasing department tell us we are going to have a provider, can we assess them after asking whether it was business critical or not. If they are not, we need to stop. Because it's already difficult doing what's relevant, so let's not do things that are useless. So this part of the process, we do not have it. This is what we do not have. We have good relationship with purchasing, but it's not perfect, so we looked for a purchaser. We brought her in the cyber team and told her, come work with us, see what's happening, and help us get a better structure. This is where we are. This is a good idea. Doing cyber with a purchaser means you will understand the provider better, and it's not difficult to help her work on cyber because these are still quite simple processes. It's not so. It's a possibility if you have open positions, vacancies. If you have specialists with the provider relationships, you could have an influence capacity in your company that will be stronger. Thank you. Yes, Jérôme is speaking in the plenary in a few minutes. So thank you, Jérôme. We should have stopped 10 minutes ago. Martina, Jean-Yves, Laurent, Estelle, thank you very much. We need to stop here. Thank you. As you can see, we are present on the I8 stand, and we will be delighted to continue the conversation with you. Thank you.